All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, I'll be doing my Week 1 recap in college football. Now, we do still have a couple games to be played, 2 marquee matchups on Sunday and then 1 on Monday, but I definitely wanted to go ahead and get this video pumped out for you guys, recapping everything that's happened so far in Week 1 of college football. We're going to start with how the top 25 teams fared, some notable games outside of the top 25, then I'm going to go ahead and do my own Week 1 top 25 rankings. And I want to start with, an upset that a lot of people probably didn't see coming. That's Alabama losing in Tallahassee to Florida State. All offseason long, it seemed like a lot of people were just expecting Alabama to completely come in and roll FSU after a 2-win season. And my commentary was very consistent. It's like, I'm not convinced that Bama's going to win this game at all. If they do, it's going to be only by a couple of points. And the analysis was just very simple. Alabama last year, they struggled versus a very similar style of offense of the one Gus Malzahn implemented today that worked to success. A lot of motion, a variety of different run calls, downhill running with the quarterback involved heavily. They struggled big time with that. Oklahoma did it, despite having probably the nation's worst offensive line. Vanderbilt did it. Of course, their run game is very below average. Numerous times last year, Alabama just struggled with that, despite having great talent on the D-line and at linebacker. So I was not shocked to really see this performance today. And as the days counted down before this game, the more confidence I got in Florida State. Now, I did end up picking Alabama to win the game, albeit a close game is what I picked. But I'm not shocked at all by this, and I thought Florida State would compete the entire time. A lot of people did not feel that way. It was just a consistent theme with Alabama last year, not just how bad the run defense was today, but this entire team for Alabama last year just did not seem like they were very good at anything. And I get it, like Jalen Milroe, a lot of the negatives that were credited to him, he earned. He deserved a lot of that, the flack he got, but at the same time, he was the entire heart and soul of your football team with his playmaking and his running ability. And that's why I was very concerned about Alabama coming into this year. And I was not very high on this Crimson Tide team because last year the running backs didn't run very well. The wide receivers, Miller would either miss them or they wwouldn't help him out all that much. Ryan Williams, of course, had a couple of games where he was good. Today he was awful. 3 drops. Couldn't really separate. Gurmy Bernard was terrific. He had almost, 150 yards receiving for him. So he was a consistent target for Ty Simpson. Run blocking wasn't great. Pass protection last year also wasn't very good. The things I'm mentioning, you can compare them side by side from today and how they looked last year. They were just not very good at anything, and that has carried over into 2025. And without Milroe there, what do we do now? What do we do with this football team? They have no identity. They don't seem to do anything very good. Late in the game, they forced a 3rd and long, and we had a silly penalty on one of the defensive linemen, pushing the quarterback when he's already on the ground, and they ended up scoring a touchdown on that drive. And, it was a one-score game. Alabama still had a chance in this contest. And so I think Alabama's very disappointing. They're in a very tough spot right now. I really did not expect any improvement from them coming into this game. That's why I thought Florida State would be able to contend, and they ended up winning the darn thing outright. And so I think for Alabama, what do you do? A lot of soul searching here. Again, they just struggled to defend the motion in the misdirection, run-heavy offense. Castellanos was playing with a ton of confidence. He backed up the talk from the offseason. He said, they're not going to be able to stop me, and really, they couldn't. And, so I think the Alabama defense, they have Georgia coming up in a couple of weeks. They have a lot to figure out, but they got to figure things out on offense as well. Right tackle still a big weakness for him. Wilkin Formby was abysmal. Even when pass pro was good, nothing was available downfield. Simpson wasn't really showcasing much field vision. Lots of running and scrambling around. The run game, they were good on that first drive. That was it. Nothing the rest of the game. They showcased physicality over the first couple of minutes of this game. A nice long drive to open things up with 7 points. Rest of the game, nothing. 87 yards rushing on 29 attempts. It was just abysmal. Jam Miller, of course, he can be a difference maker at times. I'm not going to sit here and say much would have been different if he was playing in this contest. Maybe with his ability as a pass catcher potentially. Just top to bottom, Alabama, it looked like the exact same team from last year. All the weaknesses you saw in 2024 carried over to 25, and now you have inexperienced quarterback that doesn't have the same skill set as the one they had last year. Alabama is, I think, in big trouble. You got Wisconsin in a couple weeks. Should be able to win that game. They have problems on offense, but that's a good defense that Wisconsin has. And then you have Georgia as you jump into conference play. I'm just not really sure what Alabama's going to do. For Florida State, this is a big win. I think it's more about how bad Alabama is than how good Florida State is. This is a big momentum booster for them after last year. I think this is a scheme they can implement in conference play and potentially have good success. before FSU. It was really about just following the script when it comes to the game plan. 49 total carries, 230 yards rushing. Really didn't do much through the air. They did have 2 big passing plays, though. That's all you needed to complement this rushing attack. Deuce Robinson only had 2 grabs for 18 yards. You'll see him get more involvement as the season goes on. Guys like Earl Little were tremendous. A former Alabama player at DB had a phenomenal game. Dribbler Rawls was good. Jeremiah Wilson as well. So resurgent performance for Florida State. Another disappointing effort for Alabama. The alarm is going off for the Crimson Tide, and it's going to take a lot to really right the ship in 2025. Already seems like a lost season. Moving to another game that was highly notable, of course, Texas and Ohio State. This is a game that it went exactly kind of how I thought it would be. That'd be a low-scoring game. 2 quarterbacks both really making their first career starts against some really tough defenses. And, of course, the story is going to be Arch Manning. He just did not look very good or comfortable in this contest. And I never felt that it was going to be very, definitive of how he'll do this year. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of overreactions to this contest, but I didn't expect a sharp performance. We didn't get one, and I don't think it really changes my opinion on him at all. Going into this game, you have inexperienced wide receivers. They're a very young group. The offensive line's pretty much brand new. The only really veteran presence on the offense is the running back group. So I definitely expected Texas's offense to get off to a slow start this year, and I think through September it's going to be quite bumpy as they get in the conference play. You're really going to start that. You're going to start to see that talent rub off on them. The Buckeyes, their defense played great coverage. Nothing was available downfield at all. The new look defensive line looked good. Guys like Bayou Atkinson, Edric Houston, Arvell Reese was sharp at linebacker. So was Sonny Styles. The thing is that Ohio State, they were in a much better position the entire game because it was a very conservative approach. They didn't want to put Sand in a spot to make mistakes, especially once they got the lead. So obviously you're going to look at the game plans and say, well, Ohio State wasn't much better on offense. It's like it was a different script for Ohio State, though. Great drive to start the second half running the ball for Texas, but inside the 5, the shoes manned up once again, something you saw often last year. Interior got great push, stuffed them on 4th down. Second drive of the half, Arch forced one right into an interception. Coverage remained elite. Jermaine Matthews balled out today. I know he got beat on that touchdown, but it was still good coverage. Livingston just made a little bit better of a play. And so the Ohio State defense, they remained great because the secondary still had veterans despite the front of their defense, the entire defensive line being remade. The secondary was still a veteran group. Caleb Downs was a great center fielder today. Matthews, of course, stepping up into that role of CB2. Davison Igbeson was great against the run. So this game exactly went how I thought it would be. The Ohio State offense, though, again, they were much better in short yardage situations. They didn't have a single run of over 10 yards, but it was a very conservative approach. Lots of play-action passes where they're not putting the ball in harm's way. Targeted Jeremiah Smith mainly in the quick passing game. On that touchdown, the Carnell Tate, you saw them go play action and take a shot, and it cashed in, but they were far from opening this offense up. The throw was also underthrown by Julian Sayin. They just wanted to win this game. They didn't want to put themselves in tough spots to really prove a point. You even seen it in the run game. Not very aggressive. It was downhill running. Didn't look to get to the boundary. Just wanted to stay ahead of the sticks. And I thought Ohio State executed the game plan really to perfection as well as you could. I know that's crazy considering they had only about 200 yards in this game. They weren't very good in 3rd down. But in terms of game script, it went perfectly how they wanted to. And as the weeks go on, this offense is going to be opened up. Sayin's going to start clicking with these receivers, and you're going to see them look as good as they did last year. Arch Manning, he was bailed out on a bad force under pressure in the 4th quarter. The drive ended with another 4th down stop. He had a nice throw. A couple of them late in the game. They had a chance there. He had clean pockets really all game outside of some delayed linebacking pressure by the Buckeyes. On the final play, though, the backside pressure was not picked up. C.J. Hicks was able to force a short throw, came up just shy of the sticks. So the game, 21 total points. I certainly expected a low-scoring game. The under 47 was one of my favorite plays of the week. Easy bet to make there. Arch Manning, of course, didn't play a great game. I think a lot of overreactions, again, are going to be had about that. But the game went exactly how I thought it would, and these teams are going to play better as the season goes on, so I'm not worried about either of them, Texas included. They'll be just fine. Looking at another marquee matchup, the top 10 game between Clemson and LSU. Now, this one I certainly didn't expect as few points as we did, but I think we learned a lot about both of these teams. Really, LSU, this was a very impressive performance by those Tigers coming from Baton Rouge. A lot of people didn't expect them to win this game. I thought it would be a close contest. I ended up picking Clemson to win the game. I thought that for my preseason prediction, I have these teams rematching in the national title with LSU winning the Natty. So I went with Clemson in the first one. I think they'll rematch and LSU will get the best of them. But they went ahead and got the job done. 1-0. They finally win a season opener. And this was just impressive in so many ways. Garrett Nussmeier showcasing his maturity, showcasing his patience, especially early on, where the LSU wide receivers, the communication was just sluggish in terms of alignments, being on the same page. Bauer Sharp had a fumble that led to a field goal for Clemson. A lot of inconsistencies early on in the game, and Nussmeier thought through that. He didn't make bad throws. He really, was good all night long when it came to his accuracy and making the right reads. I thought that the patience was just impressive. Led to a drive right before half. They were stopped short inside the 15 at the end of the first half. And into the second half, though, these pass catchers started making great plays. Trey'Dez Green, he had a nice touchdown in the second half. One thing I loved is, the play calling in this game was tremendous. They kept doing quad formation in the red zone, and it would put Green one-on-one, 6'7", a lot of weight, a lot of athleticism, and it worked both times. The first one, it drew a pass interference, and I'm pretty sure they ended up scoring with Durham on that same drive, and then they had a touchdown to Green one-on-one again in the fourth quarter, so that formation worked twice, and that's going to be unstoppable at times in the red zone because he is such a baller. That being Trey'Dez Green out there at tight end, he's going to draw a lot of favorable matchups for him that people are not going to be able to stop. So that was very great scheming by LSU. The Clemson linebackers, they're flying to the ball. The defensive line, they're inconsistent with their pressure. TJ Parker made some good plays, but overall him and Peter Woods were kind of quiet in this contest. Thought the secondary played pretty well, but the LSU receivers, they started to take over late in the game. Berrien Brown showcasing nice hands, something I know he's really improved on. His ability to catch the football, ended up reversing that touchdown. It looked like a bit of a blown call by the refs. They got bailed out, that being Clemson. Aaron Anderson started to take over, almost ended the day of 100 yards. So you really start to see that versatility of the receiving group pay off in the second half. Brian Kelly, he was incredibly impressive with his calmness. Obviously, that's something that's been a problem for him, I think, kind of being a hothead over the last couple of years. And he was really impressive in that regard. And, I think that was able to keep this team. That's why they're able to stay so focused. And that's why Nussmeier, his maturity was able to really be showcased because his head coach, the guy leading the charge, was showcasing his calmness. So I think there was a lot of things in that regard that was impressive for LSU. And of course, their defense was tremendous. When you look at the Clemson offense, early on, LSU sending blitzes, so Clayton Klubnik, Garrett Riley was starting to get him on the move, and it really worked well at times early on. They were able to get completions out of the pocket. Riley was mixing it up with his calls. They were showcased great coaching on that block by Tyler Brown that set up a Clemson red zone trip, capped off of a physical run by Adam Randall on fourth down for the touchdown. Klubnik also made things happen with his legs on that drive. Later in the game, Klubnik had a bad interception. Unblocked pressure, overthrew his wide receiver in zone. Mansour Delane, who was elite in this game, got the pick. Design quarterback runs for Klubnik were just not very effective like we're used to seeing in that second half. And, of course, LSU was getting good pressure. The interior offensive line was really struggling, which is, of course, the weakest part of their offense, probably the entire football team, and they just didn't handle it very well. Klubnik was on the move a lot in this contest. And the biggest problem is these receivers in TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco, these guys are physical specialists. As X and Z receivers, they're the best when it comes to making plays towards the boundary, and they just weren't really able to do much in that realm in this game. So the loss of Antonio Williams, who got injured in the first quarter, proved to be big. I thought Tyler Brown, of course, he was a standout 2 years ago, is capable of making plays in the slot. And of course, he's the one that had that block that helped set up a touchdown early on in the game. He's got good route running, good playmaking ability. But the loss of Williams proved to be big because they just couldn't do anything towards the boundary when it comes to throwing the ball outside the numbers. And Williams, he's that guy that usually cooks in the slot. So it was definitely shocking to see Clemson's passing attack just be out of sync so much. For LSU, their defense, that was just ridiculous. Harold Perkins, you knew he was going to be in some type of versatile role this year coming off an injury, kind of a forgotten player until tonight. And they used him all around in the slot, and as a pass rusher, as a QB spies, where he really thrived. His pressure there at the end sealed it with his speed, showcased his ability to make plays in that regard. And again, Mansour Delane was phenomenal in his debut. Patrick Payton, Jack Pyburn, I thought they both had good games. Two transfer defensive ends, very stout against the run. Neither team could really generate much. I thought LSU did a little bit, better of a job of staying consistent with their approach. Clemson, of course, ended the game with 31 yards rushing. Randall had 16 yards on 5 carries. They just didn't try to do a whole lot. Klubnik had 8 attempts for 1 yard because, again, the QB run was just not working. And I think this is going to be a problem all year for Clemson. Their rushing attack, they got to figure something out. I think Randall is going to be a good versatile player for them, kind of like how Xavier Thomas was for LSU. I think he's a Swiss Army knife. I like how they utilized him tonight. But for Clemson, they got to figure something out on the ground. I think LSU will be able to have adequate balance when it comes to their rushing attack and their offense. Neither team last year really ran the ball all that well. I guess Phil Maffa and Clemson did in conference play, but against the tougher opponents, it was just nowhere to be found. So for Clemson, it's kind of concerning, especially since their passing attack wasn't very good. But a lot of credit to LSU. The zone coverage was tremendous. Playmaking by all the corners. I was just very impressed by LSU. It's my national title pick, and this is a great start for them. So that's going to, kind of do things for the major marquee games within the top 15. Penn State blew the cover against Nevada, late scored there, so the Wolfpack will cash your tickets on that one. I had Georgia minus 38.5. They ended up giving up a late touchdown, the win by 38 against Marshall. Gunnar Stockton utilized his legs a lot. It's kind of interesting. But for the most part, they were just rotating all kinds of different guys, a receiver and running back. It's unfortunate they blew the cover, but Zachariah Branch had a nice long touchdown. So this is a team that's going to be facing Alabama in a couple weeks in Georgia. Oregon, they're like 28-point favorites versus the FCS national champs, Montana State. They put a complete beating on them, almost dropped 60. Dante Moore is really efficient, spreaded the ball around. Malik Benson led the team of 5 wrecks for 50-plus yards and a touchdown. They're really hoping he can mold into a top-flight target because Oregon has a lot of concerns at wide receiver due to injuries and whatnot. They had a guy recently kicked off the team or suspended or whatever. So Oregon is really thin at wide receiver. So if Benson can step up as a veteran of college football, has never really been that great. That's certainly going to do a lot for them. Illinois, 48-point favorites. They won by 49. That's amazing for them against an FCS squad. Play at Duke in week 2. It's going to be a tough contest for what is a top 10, probably going to be a top 10 team here come a couple of days. South Carolina, they'll be playing on Sunday. Michigan, Bryce Underwood finally got on the field. He was good, solid game, 250 yards. We had some boneheaded throws. Overall was efficient, though. Justice Haynes in his debut was great, 160 and 3 scores. Offense got a little stagnant at times, and they weren't really able to pull away against a pretty weak New Mexico team. They're going to play out of Oklahoma here in the coming week. So, Michigan, it's going to be a good team this year. But I think in terms of, trying to figure things out on offense and establishing balance, it's going to take some time for them. Moving to some of the other teams in the top 25 rankings that got, the play this weekend. Kansas State, I don't know what's going on with them. 17th ranked team. They barely survived at home against an FCS opponent after losing in Dublin. The hangover is real. No Dylan Edwards, who got hurt first play of the season for him in Ireland. The run game has just lacked the explosiveness with him being injured. They've not been able to manufacture much, and Avery Johnson I don't think is really capable just yet of really uplifting this entire offense by himself because they're not built to just be one-dimensional. I think you've really seen that be a problem, but the defense has also not been very good. Second half against Iowa State, got grinded down on against the run, gave up 2 70-plus yard drives in the fourth quarter here against North Dakota. I expect them to fall out of the top 25 rankings completely. Texas A&M against a good UTSA team, the team that I picked to be the G5 nominee for the CFP. They hung around there for a little bit, but A&M eventually pulled away in the second half. They allowed a 75-yard rushing touchdown. After that, the defense really tightened up. Did well against a good passing attack. Texas A&M, Marcel Reed really shined. The receivers, the transfers, these guys really balled out. KC Concepcion had a punt return TD early in the game. Also has 70 yards and a receiving touchdown. He was also wide open earlier in the game. Should have had a hat trick there, but was unable to connect. Mario Craver, 122 and 2 scores. So these guys, they showed up and instantly made an impact. The run game is quite weak, though. They didn't really give the running backs many touches at all. Reed really didn't do much with his legs either. I think that's part of their offense they're really going to figure out. They'll be fine in that regard. I think if they can, have this consistency through the air, though, A&M could absolutely be dangerous. Great win there against UTSA, who ended up getting the cover, though, of a late touchdown. So, good job by the Roadrunners in that one. 24th ranked Tennessee, I thought that they were going to cover with ease against Syracuse, and the Cuse put up a bit of a fight, late in the game, playing from behind. Passing attack was able to generate some nice production, but early on in this game, they had no success throwing the football, allowed Tennessee to pull out to a nice lead. A lot of variety was showcased from the Tennessee defense in terms of pressure, allowing them to get into the backfield often, a lot of sacks, a lot of tackles for loss. Yazzie Willis showed nice physicality in the hole. He had almost 100 yards rushing, a lot of touches, and he was great in the red zone with 3 touchdowns. So it wasn't a perfect performance from the Tennessee defense, which is expected to be really good this year. But they did enough early on in this game to allow them to pull away. They didn't look back after that. Joey Aguilar in his first start for UT. He was inaccurate and shaky early on as the game went on, though. He started seeing the field well, running the offense, knowing where he wants to go with the ball. The run game was dominant all game. I thought that sort of the biggest advantage would lie with Tennessee, is I thought the run game would just annihilate Syracuse at the line of scrimmage. All 3 running backs did damage. They all scored. They're really rotating touches very well. End of the game with 246. 2 touchdowns on the ground, and then leading rusher Star Thomas, he had a nice reception. It was a 7-yard grab early on in the game for another TD. So the running back room is great. All these guys are going to split touches throughout the year. Thomas, Bishop, and Lewis. I thought Tennessee looked good in this one, able to get the cover in that one. I think for Syracuse, they should be fine. I think this offense will certainly grow in conference play. Just a tough matchup they had in this one. You also had some games on Friday. What was it? Georgia Tech surviving against Colorado. That game should have been a lot more clear in terms of result, but they had 3 turnovers early on that just hurt them. That team that isn't exactly built on explosive plays. Haynes King, though, had a big rushing touchdown late in that game to put them ahead. Colorado, with some bad coaching and some bad clock management, led to them not really having a great shot there at the end to tie it or to win the game. Georgia Tech, though, rushing attack looked good once again. Caden Salter, the running game with his legs, I think, showed a little bit more edge than we've seen under Deion Sanders. So I think Colorado, a really respectable performance. The defensive line is really good, even though they gave up a lot of rushing yards. They were battle-tested, able to get some consistent pressure, force some turnovers. So I think Colorado, pretty inspiring performance, because I really did not think that'd be a close game. Auburn and Baylor, I picked Auburn to win by 2 scores. That's exactly what happened. Their defense was pretty inconsistent in terms of coverage. Caleb Harris at safety was abysmal. They're giving up way too much free space in the middle of the field. They just really struggled to defend inside, especially the linebackers. The Auburn defensive line was showcasing nice aggression, though, stuffed the run game the entire contest. For Auburn, I think this is a team that's going to be really good on offense because they impressed in the run game. I thought that they would shine against Baylor running the football, but I didn't expect them to be that dominant. And they were just ahead of the sticks the entire contest, which I think was very impressive. Rotation of backs for them as well. Jackson Arnold, though, really shined, 137 and 2 scores. Cobb and Alston both had 70-plus rushing, so 300-plus and 4 scores on the ground in the first game of the season for Auburn. For Arnold, though, it was a lot of, first read not there. He's just going to take off and run, and it worked. It worked really well against Baylor. He wasn't showcasing confidence in the pass game. Great surge from the offensive line. Again, head of the sticks the entire contest, but that's concerning from Auburn. You don't want to see that week to week, and it's not going to work every single week. But I think as they start to play some of the weaker opponents, as the weeks go on, they're going to build up some rapport in the passing game. Cam Coleman only 1 grab for 23 yards, for example. So the passing game is going to find its edge and its consistency. But in this game against Baylor, they certainly did not showcase it. And I think Auburn, they're setting themselves up to have dangerous balance for the entire season. So, that pretty much wraps it up for the notable contest. We're going to look at my post-week 1 top 25 rankings. Now Miami and Notre Dame still have to play. SC still needs to play. I think Miami's going to beat Notre Dame. If they don't, so be it. I think they're just going to flip-flop rankings if they do. If Miami loses, it's probably not going to be by a whole lot anyways. They'll probably just drop a couple of spots. I think Ohio State, they're going to go back to number 1 after beating Texas. LSU, they're going to jump inside the top 3 here after beating Clemson, who falls down to number 8. And again, this is kind of my own thinking, but at the same time, just kind of trying to project what the AP is going to look like. So a little bit of both. I think Clemson falling to 8 might be, potentially a little bit too disrespectful, but considering just the way everything kind of played out, I think that seems appropriate for them. Michigan, Florida, SMU, all these teams are going to be jumping up a couple of spots, or 1 spot each, that is. Florida State, I think they'll jump all the way to number 16 after beating the 8th ranked team in the country in Alabama, who's going to fall all the way down to 22. I don't think the AP is going to be kind. Again, this team just was not very good. They look exactly the same as they did in 2024, and I think they deserve to fall tremendously. Boise State, they're going to fall out. They're going to be replaced by USF, who beat the hell out of them, quite frankly. On Friday night, or it was a Thursday night, that is, in Tampa. It's kind of a disappointing game. Boise State is 5-point favorites. I got smoke. Maddox Madsen played poor. Defense held up well for the most part, but it just eventually on the field too much. They can only contain that Byron Brown offense for so long. They had a silly late flag on a 3-and-out on a hit. So USF continued the drive, ended up scoring. Got out coached on the fake punt TD as well. Just a disappointing game from Boise. The one good drive they had running the ball, they fumbled. So there's a lot to figure out for Boise. All the components are there. They returned a lot of starters from last year. So I think that Boise can figure things out and still win their conference. But USF's going to replace them, I think, in the top 25. Kansas State, they deserve the fallout after 2 weeks of just poor football, quite frankly, from them. And I think everything else is kind of crystal clear. Not really too many newcomers other than Florida State and USF, that is. And I think Indiana, they had kind of a shocking performance. The passing game didn't really showcase much consistency. A lot of just unfortunate plays. Elijah Surratt, he had a wide open touchdown, I think once or twice in that game. They weren't able to hook up. So Mendoza did not showcase great efficiency in his debut. They'll be all right overall for Indiana. That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.